I was in the church. It was a dark church, and there was a light illuminating the golden monstrance and the host in the middle. And there was just a moment of the Holy Spirit's enlightenment, and I looked up and I met his gaze. And there's just this incredible realization that God was not just this perfect supreme being out there who'd created me, but that he was there hidden in humility for me in the Eucharist. And that was the moment when I fell in love with him.
Religious life didn't make any sense to me until I realized that being a sister was being a bride of Christ and living the love of his heart in my own person, but then also living it and giving it to every person that I meet and every person that I pray for through my spiritual motherhood. And that was the key that really made religious life make sense, and it made it so attractive for me. It made me want to give my whole life to Christ.
I first knew that I was called to religious life when I was reading a biography of Mother Teresa, and I received the great grace to realize for the first time that if she could give her life totally to God at a young age, at the age of 18, then maybe that's what God was also calling me to do with my life. The morning of final profession was really one of the most beautiful days of my life.
It was a very busy day. There's the rehearsal and there's, little things that have to happen. So a lot of, externally, a lot of those just practical things are going on. And there's a lot of joy in the house because all of the sisters are home and they're all, preparing for the guests that will come.
That's when the flurry of preparations begins. Everyone, kicks into high gear and is preparing for the mass and then the reception following.
One of the really most beautiful things is just being surrounded by the sisters and being able to tangibly feel their love and their prayers and their support as I prepare to take this step.
One of the other special things that the sisters do for the sisters making vows is they put a vase with a single white rose at your place at table, just letting you know of their prayers for you.
I think that I was most nervous about just the enormity of what I was about to do.
You're standing on the diving board and it's, a hot day and the water is rippling below you and all you want to do is jump. And there's just this poised moment of expectation.
Being a bride of Christ is really the whole reason why we make final vows.
It's a really big decision. It's for your entire life. And that can be a little nerve-wracking, but by that point, the morning of final profession, there really weren't a lot of nerves. It was mostly just a very deep peace.
One of the beautiful things about our religious profession is that it takes place in the context of the Mass. So every liturgy starts with this movement of procession, and there's the practical, the priest and the servers and those involved have to get to the front of the church, the sanctuary.
The sister walks down the aisle just the same way that a bride would walk down the aisle at her wedding. And I like to think that it's God the Father who is escorting her, because the bride is always escorted by her father to meet her spouse. And in a lot of ways, it's God the Father who's giving us to his son in the profession mass. So I think it's beautiful in a lot of ways that the sister walks by herself down the aisle to be given away.
I remember before first vows being so excited and being so nervous of doing the right thing at the right time. And before final vows, I just remember just being able to take everything in and recognize the faces of the people.
The choir is just finishing the prelude and you see the bishop there, you see your family and friends and all the sisters there as well. And it's really just a moment of total joy and expectation. It's the moment before the bride walks up the aisle at her wedding.
You can look straight down to the crucifix. So you see Christ, our spouse, represented in the crucifix, and then below that is the tabernacle, so our spouse, our bridegroom is waiting for us there. We're body and soul. The Catholic Church loves the use of tangible reminders to represent spiritual reality. So the incense represents, in particular, just the prayers rising up.
And this is done in any Mass where they're using incense.
So after the proclamation of the gospel, before his homily, the bishop comes down to the base of the altar for the Rite of Calling,
where the bishop asks if we're ready to persevere in this community for our life.
You're saying, I'm the instrument and you get to work in me however you want, and I'm asking you to keep doing that for all my life.
Then the bishop gave the homily.
I thought the homily was wonderful. I felt like the bishop was speaking not only to me and to the other sisters who were making vows, but to my family and to, all the people that had come to support us in making final vows. The Litany of the Saints comes next in the liturgy,
where we all prostrated ourselves and the choir and the congregation prayed to particular saints for our perseverance, for our sanctity, and for our continued love of God throughout our entire lives.
We are not alone on our journey to heaven. We have the saints. We have those who are now in beatitude with Christ. So we are very deliberately asking their help, these who have followed Christ, who have walked the path that we wish to walk.
The reason why we do that is because we're laying down our whole life to God. We're giving everything to Him in sacrifice.
I did have a moment towards the end of the Litany of the Saints where we'd been prostrated for quite a long time at that point. And I remember thinking, I'm going to have a huge red mark on my forehead.
After the Litany of the Saints is the pinnacle moment. It is the actual moment of profession.
And we have written out our vows beforehand, and we're reading out the vows, the promises that we're making to God.
We have one hand on the Bible, and then Mother will put her hand on top of ours. And that's a really beautiful just symbol and sign of the fact that she's the one, yes, who's receiving them, but also that the community is promising to support us throughout our religious life.
And after pronouncing those vows, the sister and the prioress general go to the altar, and you sign your vows on the altar.
And the reason why it's done on the altar is because the altar is the place of sacrifice, right? That's where the Eucharist is consecrated, and that's where we're handing our whole lives over to God.
So immediately after professing vows, the sisters come back down, and the bishop then prays the prayer of solemn consecration over the professed.
It's a beautiful prayer that basically goes through all of salvation history. And it ends with this climax of imploring the Holy Spirit to come down upon us. So after the solemn consecration of the professed, Mass continues pretty much as normal. The Eucharistic prayers are special for a Mass of religious profession, so they're all kind of tied into the religious life. At the end, the bishop gives everyone a blessing, and we process out of the church.
After the profession Mass is entirely over, the sisters and the guests at the profession Mass are able to go back to the mother house, which is not too far from the church, to have essentially a wedding reception. Our sisters spent a lot of time and a lot of work preparing for the reception. We make the food for it and the wedding cake, the profession cake, and the sisters who make vows were able to just be with our families, to be with those who might know us from the apostolate who have come to support us.
Your vocation doesn't just pop out of nowhere, right? It's nourished and it's fostered by your family. To have them there and to have them be with you in this celebration of what God is doing and what God has done in your life is just really special.
And it's really just a beautiful and a joyous time to witness that this is not just any Mass, this is not just any day, this is a wedding, and we want to celebrate it as such.